You got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.
Welcome back to another episode of Dynasty Theory. We are here, Dan. The season, it's upon us 1 week in. How are you feeling so far?
Man, the season's big time upon us, JB. I'm feeling pretty good, though. Trying to balance what is just week one and what was a fluke. You know, so we're going to, I think, sort through a lot of that tonight, which was fun. And on a side note, man, on the same day of, reviewing all these football games, the iPhone came out with a new iPhone Pro Max with the best battery life ever, JB. And I thought of you. And this is related to fantasy football. Ask me how. About 500 JB posts in the Discord later where every one of our listeners has seen your dead battery on all your screenshots. This is your opportunity. Biggest battery ever. I think it was meant for you. It was made for you, JB, for all the Discord action you participated.
I know. It's been fun in the DD Fantasy Discord. It's been nonstop. So maybe I do need a better battery. But like I said, week one, pretty much in the books. As I've said, we record this Monday night at 9:00 Eastern. So if you see Dan or I looking down or away, we're probably checking the score and some of the things happening in the Jets 49ers. But we want to talk about, and I said this last week, right? The season is upon us. We want to hit our stride and kind of get a nice flow going week to week, right? So the things that I kind of want to focus on, resetting the market. There are certain players that, as we get this episode out early, all of the different websites, whether it's Fantasy Calc, whether it's KTC, whether it's Dynasty Daddy, whether it's any of your favorite trade calculators that you use, there is always going to be a little bit of that lag, between real time things that are changing. So our goal here on Dynasty Theory Weekly, each and every Monday going into Tuesday, is to be able to give you a few players that maybe didn't have a great week, and we might expect that trend to continue. So we're looking to maybe sell low, or a player that was kind of disliked. They had a strong week. We think it's going to continue, and we might be going out and looking to buy high. Dan, on every show, and we do it too, right? Every show, folks talk about buy low, sell high. Yes, we get it. But there are times when it makes sense to sell at a further discount compared to market because we truly believe that value is going to continue to drop, or buy above market because we believe that value is going to continue to rise. So we're going to be talking about some players to reset the market. Dan, you looked at the notes. Week one, the data is available. So I dug into week one usage. I'm going to be doing it each and every week. I was dropping different tidbits and notes throughout the day in the DD Fantasy Discord. So we're going to talk about the week one usage, trends, and then we're going to start the show with some injuries. And there were some big name injuries here just in week one. And we didn't even realize Christian McCaffrey wasn't going to play until this evening. So a couple of the big injuries: Jordan Love, Puka Nacua, he is now on IR, so at least 4 weeks. Jordan Addison, he's got the ankle. Odunze didn't even realize being engaged on a block. He banged up his knee. Jake Ferguson, he's week to week. David Njoku, he's week to week, it sounds like. What is the biggest injury here out of all of these guys for you as it relates to Dynasty Fantasy Football, Dan?
Probably a combination of either Jordan Love or Puka Nacua, just because you're waiting, 4 weeks with Nacua, right? Or 5 weeks, that IR, that's the 4-week IR. So it's 5 weeks, I think, till you get them.
And they have a bye week in there too. So I think that gives them the extra week then.
Helps a little bit there, but you're missing your stud receiver for a handful of weeks. And then Jordan Love, you're hoping it's on the shorter side, but you're still out as starting quarterback for a few weeks. And if you were your roster was set up with Love and only one other quarterback, now you're down to one quarterback for that stretch. Or if your other quarterback was maybe Bryce Young or someone that Danny Dimes who didn't perform well this week, you're not feeling warm and fuzzy about that. So I think with these injuries, there's, the long-term concerns, JB, and then there's, just some as we get to prepare for next week. And I think as we go through guys that we're going to sell or buy, it all comes down to roster management. Who do you need to be buying to help you get through 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks without a Jordan Love or Puka Nacua, or who do you just need for some help for 1 to 2? That's what we want to figure out.
And we're seeing a market. So I'm looking at Dynasty Daddy. Some of these trades, like, perfectly fine, don't bat an eye, but I just want to call out a few. Baker Mayfield in a second for Jordan Love, 12-team, Superflex, start 10, full PPR. Jordan Love for Sam Darnold in a second. What are we doing here? And again, listen, I know most of our listeners, we have very smart listeners, very smart league mates. And you're probably thinking, JB, Dan, this isn't going to happen in my league. And there's a very good chance it's not. But whenever there's an injury, we're going to look throughout the week. And on Dynasty Daddy, they have the bubbles that show the larger the bubble, the more trades have been completed. My guess is every one of these guys mentioned is going to have one of the larger bubbles. It happens. Anytime there is an injury, it creates a little urgency, even though it's week 1. And maybe some secondary things with like a Jordan Love. Maybe we see Malik Willis trades. And I beg you, don't trade for Malik Willis. Don't. Luckily, the Jordan Love injury is the only thing at quarterback right now. I would not be looking to make a move involving Malik Willis. But like you said, Dan, maybe it's a situation where you had Jordan Love and Bryce Young. This Jordan Love injury, it feels kind of similar a few years back when Dak Prescott was banged up and he was out. I remember there were folks, hey, I'm going to unload Dak because I want to get a starter. There were other ways to supplement your lineup. And I wouldn't be necessarily looking to explore opportunities to move off of Love, to move off of Puka. Jordan Addison, that market was kind of deflated already. The interesting one here for me is Rome Odunze. I think there's going to be people, based on the way some of these veterans performed, you could probably do something involving a Mike Evans plus a small piece. You could probably do something, a Cooper Kupp plus a small piece. And a lot of folks listening right now, if they're contenders, you would probably have to really think about it if you wanted to give up a Kupp or Evans in a deal centered around Rome Odunze. But here on Dynasty Theory, we're looking to add value to your overall portfolio. And I think a move involving Rome Odunze is one that could certainly be available right now, especially with the lack of passing production from Caleb Williams there in week 1.
Yeah, whether it's you want to go after Rome now or if you want to be patient, he still might be that available in a few weeks. It was one of the concerns and one of the things that was, at least for now, answered, unless Chicago could figure it out, is that O-line. Like, that O-line is a concern, and he's a rookie quarterback still learning. So as much as he has that talent around him, he got a young kid learning with not much time to figure it out. And then when I say by not much time, it's like there's only a couple seconds and that ball has got to be out. So there's some concerns there. But as you're talking, JB, if you want to build your dynasty portfolio and you're looking years ahead, Rome's a talented dude, and I think Caleb's going to be a talented dude and bright career ahead of him. But if you're looking to win now, there's going to be some bumps first.
Yeah, and there's going to be some opportunities because especially where Rome went, typically was going in the middle of the first in Superflex rookie drafts. There are going to be people that were looking to contend where there's going to be an opportunity. Here, we got somebody that added to Rome Odunze for Cooper Kupp. We got a Odunze for Worthy. Odunze for Addison, even though that one, they're both banged up. Let's see.
And you said, like, these things you don't think they'd happen in our leagues, but we've seen them happen in our leagues. Maybe not often, I'm not going to single anyone out, but at least once a year, there's one shocker in a league. So it can't hurt to put those offers out. And then if you're on the flip side, it also can't hurt to be in our Discord or listen to the pod to think these things through before you ship them too fast and then you have regrets.
Let me ask you a question, and this is kind of a tangent, but you brought it up specifically with Chicago, and I think it's kind of an epidemic across the NFL. Why are there so few passing touchdowns in week 1? In 2021, there were over 60 passing touchdowns in the NFL. Up to this point, second quarter of the San Francisco Jets game, there are 31. 31 this week. Cut in half. Dan, you're the real football guy. What's the issue?
I think, JB, if we were like breaking down data in 2021 preseason, you'd probably find a lot more of these teams were playing guys in the preseason. And it seems like less and less every single year. The majority of these starters got 0 reps in preseason. So then that results in line breakdowns, that results in penalties, that results in the timing being off. And it's just a decrease in production overall. There's very few coaches that are like the Andy Reids of the world that's playing Patrick Mahomes in the preseason, and he's a little less rusty than the other guys.
That was certainly one of the things. Do you think that the overall talent at the quarterback position over the last few years, do you think that's kind of been something to point to?
I think it could be, because this game has evolved where it's such a pass-centric team. We're seeing these rookie receivers. Like, we've been playing fantasy football for a while, and there were times where we had theories of, hey, third-year rookie receiver breakout. Now we're expecting that breakout year 1 in this passing league, but the quarterback talent isn't quite keeping up with the wide receiver talent. And a lot of these quarterbacks don't have a lot of college experience even. So I think that's another good factor there, JB, that you bring up.
There's Deebo Samuel with a rushing touchdown.
And Jordan Mason owners were mad because Mason had one a few plays before, but Deebo held on it and it got called back.
Oh, come on. So not only those factors, but then I was thinking with the uptick, and I don't have data pulled for this, but the seeming uptick in holding calls and the way they're really focusing on like where the guard or the tackle, like they're too far back and they were getting flagged for illegal formation. Like maybe that, like these guys, they're a little bit more hesitant to block the way they had previously. I don't know. I'm just spitballing, but when you have the passing touchdowns cut in half in just 3 years time in week 1, that's a trend that for fantasy purposes we don't want to see continue.
No, quick curb in our fantasy statistics here, and let's get a little more preseason work and get some time in. And the officiating piece, JB, I think that varies a little bit from one officiating crew to the next. As consistency is another issue, but that's another topic for another time.
All right, well let's start talking about resetting the market here. And the first guy I want to bring up, there was so much hope with Coach Canales coming over and what he was able to do with Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. And now he's going to do it with Bryce Young. That was an absolutely pathetic display from the Carolina Panthers offense. And I know the Saints, their defense, like they're not a slouch, but we're talking about resetting the market. If I can get a mid 25 second, I'm out from Bryce Young. I'm out. I expect that value to continue to decrease. And I know there are a lot of people, if there is an asset that is losing value, well, I got to buy low. And I am urging you to not buy low on Bryce Young. Maybe you don't have any shares across your portfolio, so you can't necessarily go out and sell him for below market, but don't go out and buy at a slightly deflated cost because you think I have to go out and buy low.
I definitely wouldn't buy low here. And if you have them, JB, in your portfolio, I have one share And I tried all offseason before that 13 for 30, 2 interception performance, and I couldn't get out of it. John, I tried every which way under the sun to package every which way, draft picks, non-draft picks, multiple players. I just couldn't get rid of them. No one wanted them. So now I don't know how the heck you get out of it if you have them, but I certainly wouldn't be buying to your point. I think that's an organization in shambles. I think they have mismanaged the heck out of that team with all they gave up to get Bryce Young. I know they put some more pieces around him in the O-line and with Deontay Johnson at receiver, and they tried through a little bit through the draft, but they got rid of so much on defense that now you're asking even more out of this kid, and there ain't that much talent on offense. Like, there's just so many issues in Carolina that I feel bad for Canales. This isn't, I don't think, a reflection on him. I think there's just, you can't squeeze water out of a rock. Like he went to good organizations in Tampa Bay and Seattle where he was able to get that out of Geno and Baker, and I think he played a part in that. I don't see how he could do it here in Carolina.
I'm looking at the list of quarterbacks here on Fantasy Calc, and these are based on actual trades. I always reiterate. I would take Michael Penix over Bryce Young. I would take Baker.
I like what you're thinking. It's funny though. It's just...
Baker is below him for now. Baker's going to catapult up to a top 20 quarterback. And I'm going to talk about him shortly. I'll take any 26 first. I will take Geno Smith straight up for Bryce Young. And then
you can get Geno though.
That's
don't
the
think
thing.
you could get him.
I'll take Derek Carr. I'll take Derek Carr over Bryce Young.
It's worth a try. I think that's where we're at right now.
I want out. I want out from Bryce Young. I don't know if you could do it, but I want out from Will Levis. You certainly can't do it after more allegations. I went out from Deshaun Watson. I like that line. They weren't full strength there in week 1 in Cleveland.
True.
But Deshaun Watson, like 1 week in, I was an advocate throughout the offseason. If you could get at a deflated price to go out and look to acquire. Oftentimes, I couldn't acquire at a deflated price. So ultimately, I walked away from those discussions. That group right there, I will take any second for Deshaun Watson, Bryce Young, Will Levis, if I can get it. If I can get it.
Now, did you?
I asked the question in the DD Discord. I asked the question. I said, not even trolling. Who gives you more actual usable weeks from now until the end of the 25 season? Bryce Young or Sam Darnold? And that's a real question. And when we look back at this, and it's December of 25, I really do believe that answer very well could be Sam Darnold, even if he doesn't get any starts in 2025. He could still be the answer.
And that's a great way to put it. And normally I'm one to say, and I know we're going to talk later, like Sam Darnold, we all know has been involved in a lot of trade offers in recent weeks as he's, got the starting job from McCarthy because of injury. You're going to have him for the year and he's a great offense. But I was very reluctant in a lot of leagues unless I could get him at a really good deal because I know I'm not going to have him next year. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking Bryce Young, at some point there's going to be another quarterback injury. There's going to be another need. I think somehow I could get creative and move to Sam Darnold to somebody who needs him, or he helps me for this year versus Bryce Young, where he's going to hurt you this year and you're going to get stuck with him. So that's a good point, JB. Even Darnold is an option in this case.
Well, because a player like Sam Darnold, he serves a purpose. Like if you're a contender in a pinch, if you suffered a Jordan Love injury on your roster and you trade for Sam Darnold, he's going to give you something. I don't know if we're ever going to get that from Bryce Young. So yeah, you could go out and buy at a deflated price, but I'm urging everybody, just let it go. You don't have to buy low on every player. And this next one might disappoint and upset some people. But Jaxon Smith-Njigba, he is there for me as well. Everybody thought, well, the Washington OC, he's there in Seattle now, new regime. We're going to see this team open it up. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, his ADOT is going to increase. Tyler Lockett, a year older. He was rarely targeted as a first read. And I know about that because let's go to Canton. I wasn't a first read, a second read, a third read. I burned that guy on the sideline and Dan didn't even look at me. But the usage did not change. 2 targets, 3.5 yard ADOT, wasn't demanding the targets on the first read like I mentioned. Like, this is another one. You don't need to go out and buy low. You don't need to do it. I said all offseason that Bryce Young was such an unnecessary risk. Even at his slightly lower cost, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is there as well. So he is still coming in on Fantasy Calc, wide receiver 28. I expect that to drop. I think, can I get a pair of seconds? Can I do that? Can I, right now, could I get James Conner in a second from a rebuilding team? Could I get Brian Robinson straight up? And yes, that's below market, but that's the point of this conversation. I don't think it's going to get any better for Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the near future, Dan.
I hate when you get in my head like this, JB, because now you got me thinking, I love Brian Robinson.
And listen, it's only 1 week. I know that. But we saw it last year too. And we want to see an improvement. We want to see the utilization. He eclipsed 85% route participation. But he wasn't Geno's target. Like Tyler Lockett was still demanding. I think Tyler Lockett was like 25% first down rate on per route run. It wasn't Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Like, we were expecting him to take that step, and he has not. And I don't know that it's going to change, just like I said with Bryce Young.
Yeah, I mean, at least this early in the season, Tyler Lockett's wheels have not fallen off. He looked fine. As much as I would have loved to thrown out the red challenge flag, I knew better and didn't want to lose the timeout, so I kept it in my pocket here, JB. To our listeners, I think, and I think you would even agree, it doesn't mean JSN's not going to have a good game. It might even come next week. But I think from what we're seeing, there's probably going to be very few of those really good games. And if you could get someone that's going to produce week in and week out, like you're talking about, and maybe add some draft capital to it, there could be some merit there. And I think another thing you have with Seattle is they haven't really fixed their O-line. Like, that is a below average offensive line going into the season. So Geno's not going to be getting probably much more time to throw. And to your point, Metcalf, Lockett, they're the 1-2 reads. If they're not open, he's probably dumping it off to back. So I think there's only so much Geno could carry multiple receivers in this offense.
Here's a trade, and I want your opinion. 12-team Superflex, start 9, full PPR, Jaxon Smith-Njigba or Jameson Williams.
Man, right. I think you have to go JMO. You really do. And he was a guy I was high on going into the offseason. I tried to trade for some shares, and boy, did he deliver week 1. And I don't think that's a fluke whatsoever. We've heard the coach speak. Coach Dan Campbell's normally pretty straightforward with his coach speak. They love this kid right now, and he looks legit.
Well, and for Jameson, it's not just the fantasy production. It was the what was it? 93% route participation.
Oh, yeah. He's got the pedigree too.
27% targets per route run, 10% first downs per route run, over 4 yards per route run. So even looking at it from a fantasy production, a per route basis, he checked all the boxes. And again, we talk about players like Jameson Williams. He had those baked in excuses. He had the injuries. He had the suspension. If he's able to stay healthy, he's able to put it together here because he was light coming out of college. Like I said in the Discord today, in a week, we're talking about a top 30 dynasty receiver again. That's how quickly things change. But he had the pedigree. If you have the pedigree, if people liked you pre-NFL draft and you have that bias from people, or you are coming off of a down year, but you produced previously, people are far more forgiving. and they forget more quickly of what you've done or haven't done, and things can turn, like I said, very, very quickly. So I'm taking Jameson over Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
He's also a guy we didn't write off from last year, JMO. Like, he flashed. There were some 60-yard bombs that just went off, just missed a year ago. He put in this work this offseason, and then week 1, he didn't miss. So I'm with you. All right, I might have to explore that trade too.
Do you have any guys that you're looking at on your rosters and you're like, I'm thinking about hanging on because I think the value, I think the value is going to bounce back. But then on the other hand, you're like, maybe I should just get out now.
Well, JSN was definitely one of those guys. I'm embarrassed to even mention it. I don't want to say he's one of those guys, but I couldn't really get anything for him. But Rashad Bateman was that prospect that's still lingering a little bit. But I'm just
you might be able to get a third today.
Man, it's possible. That's possible. But he's been a little underwhelming and still hanging.
I posed this question in the Heisman channel on the DD Fantasy Discord here. Here are some names that folks were a little bit concerned about, and just let me know. We'll go one by one fairly quickly. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not worried at all, hold or go out and buy more shares, 10 being get out. All right. And again, it's 1 week, but these are the overreactions and sometimes the right reactions that people have. Travis Etienne.
I'm good with him. I'm not worried at all.
Tyjae Spears.
I'd be a little worried.
The one thing I'll say with Spears, he was still involved in the passing game a decent amount. And I do think Tony Pollard looked good. He looked good. But I still do think there is some merit and some credibility when you look at it from we're going to ride the hot hand maybe. Pollard was hot. And I think you just muted yourself, Dan. But Pollard was hot, so why take him out in the run game?
So I guess I'd pose this question to you, JB. When I say I'm a little bit worried about Spears, I say that based on some of the expectations a lot of fantasy owners had going into week 1. A lot of people wrote Pollard off, and I was on Dynasty Theory saying, hey, he's got the juice, he's healthy, he didn't feel good till week 10 last year. We had that conversation. And again, I even think back to last year when the running backs were having their little protest about contracts, and Saquon Barkley's like, Pollard's a top 10 back. Now, I don't think us in the fantasy community consider him a top 10 back, but JB, if he's top 20, we're happy, man. And I think Tony Pollard is clearly a top 20 back, and I think Spears is always going to be behind him. But boy, if something happened to Pollard, he's not the biggest dude. I'd love to have Spears on my roster, and I think he's a good player. So I'm only worried from the perspective, JB, of what your expectations are.
And that is a very important piece, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's all about that baseline to an extent. So Tyjae Spears, 40% route or 40% snap share, 15% rushing market share, 53% route participation, 20% targets per route run. So there's still something there, even if Pollard is healthy, but we all know there's far too much contingent value. So I wouldn't necessarily be looking to just dump Spears, and I think there is going to be a lot of disappointment, but unless you can tier up possibly, or maybe even cross positionally, I don't mind Tyjae Spears being one of those guys that's on my roster. And if Pollard goes down, you have all that contingent upside. Deshaun Watson was mentioned multiple times, but again, now another report comes out. You're completely out on Deshaun?
Yeah, and I've been out, and I continue to be out. And it's not that you didn't make some good points, but earlier in the show there, I mean, he had 2 offensive linemen out. I do believe America owes the Cowboys an offseason apology for saying they did nothing this offseason. They got a ton of guys healthy again. They had just some small free agents. That's a legit defense. I think it's better coached, and it's going to be better. So I think there could be some better moments for Deshaun Watson this year. But, man, Njoku got hurt. All they have left is Amari Cooper. That's my other concern with him, too. Even if they get the O-line a little better, this is a team that's going to really need that run game to come through to open up the pass.
Okay. Yeah, I don't even know what you could get for Watson today. And I think I have about 7% exposure. Like I'm looking at trades that have gone down in the last day. Watson for Ridley, Watson for Godwin, Watson for Jerome Ford. As gross as that last one sounds, I don't mind that necessarily.
Yeah.
There's
It
a very
depends
good
what
chance. There's a very good
quarterback.
chance this Watson value goes to 0.
Yeah. The problem is, and I heard today, is they can't even dump him. I guess they restructured his contract, so they're on the hook for $70 million next year too.
Well,
70 mil.
Unless with this report, if he were to run into an issue with the NFL and possibly get suspended,
Someone better save the man. Somebody.
They have an out at that point, I believe, and they're off the hook for the guaranteed portion. You're on mute, Dan.
Dang, he got me so fired up. The Italian in me was, talking with the microphone again. But no, I'm telling you, I think Cleveland's probably trying to find someone to stir up some lawsuits. They've got to find an out clause here, because if not, like at some point, if he loses that locker room and just continues to be terrible, they will sit him. But they're not going to be a good team. Like this is a mess in Cleveland.
Jaylen Warren.
I'm still good on Warren. I think there's a little bit of he was hurt in the preseason. So I think I went into that game at least expecting a lesser kind of workload, but then you lose Russ Wilson too. And I think that is a factor because they manage this game even probably more conservatively than they would with Russ. I think he'll get some more carries in the upcoming weeks. But I mean,
I was talking to somebody at work today. They were asking me my thoughts. Everybody's trying to pick my brain. And I said, like, it was so unlike Justin Fields because yeah, he had that fumble on the first snap. Yeah, he missed some open receivers, but he never made that big mistake.
No.
It was a boring Justin Fields game. But if he would have done that in the first 3 years of his career, his trajectory could have been a little bit different, possibly.
Arthur Smith coached to win, and Justin Fields got 14 carries. So there's I don't think that's going to be the norm unless Justin Fields remains the quarterback. I think Russ Wilson's going to get back in there because I don't think Pittsburgh can win every game like that. I think, hey, kudos to them. They pulled out week 1.
My expectation is that Russ will start here in week 2, but I think that leash is going to be extremely short.
I can see that. Nothing pertaining to Warren, though. Warren's better with Russ. Probably not as bad. I think I would be concerned if Justin Fields was a quarterback every week because that is going to cut into Warren's carries. He's not going to take them from Najee.
That's fair. Drake London.
Not worried at all. I'm a 1. I'm good. I think Kirk Cousins is going to get him. One thing I didn't know, I guess he was going out of the pistol, a little bit different, shotgun area there for Cousins. I think there's some timing elements to that.
He was under center, I think, one time they said, or maybe the play action was only one time.
Yep. And I think I had London even going into this game. I love DFS. I know some people loved him, and I'm like, I had him as a cash play at best. Joey Porter is on the other side. I think he's one of the better corners in the National Football League. The Steelers have a good defense. We're going to put pressure on Atlanta. It wasn't really a good matchup out of the gates. I think he'll be fine. I think there's a lot more production from London to come.
And it's another situation where Cousins didn't take one preseason snap. You have a new head coach. You have a quarterback coming off of a blown Achilles. So I think if your expectation was this offense is going to come out firing, yes, you're going to be disappointed. And I think Drake London, he should be in that fairly large tier of the Olave, DJ Moore, a huge group there. But I don't think you need to jump ship. And I'm there with Chris Olave, the next guy also.
Hey, before we get to Olave, just speaking of great receivers, so Ayuk just drops one in the end zone, and good friend of mine's a Niner fan, and I see that I wasn't watching the game, but I had a text that come through, and he goes, "That's what happens when you beep and miss camp. So Ayuk fans aren't too happy right now.
Yeah. All right.
But
Well, Chris Olave, is he in the same boat? It seemed like game script really just kind of flipped that game upside down early.
Yeah, I mean, that game's just blowout city there. Like, everybody was involved in the party there with Derek Carr. Unfortunately, like if you said before the game, the Saints were going to score 47 points and Chris Olave be 2 of 11. You look at me like I had 8 heads. So, but I just think it was a Shaheed tight end running back kind of game. And it worked. It worked. But there's going to be times where they're going to need Chris Olave, and just like Drake London, there'll be production. Hey, are you a little bit concerned? Like, yeah, they're not taking that jump to like maybe Garrett Wilson territory or that next tier receivers where you kind of hoping for that little edge, because I think they're super talented. But there's better production ahead at least.
Trevor Lawrence, any concern there? And again, these are all names that were dropped in the Discord whenever I posed the question.
Yeah, I saw some people dogging on Lawrence a little bit. The first half, my Lord, Jacksonville was clicking, and in the passing game was a little bit more successful. I think things sputtered a bit in the second half. If Etienne doesn't fumble, they probably do score again in the red zone, and maybe the narrative's a little different. He was just inconsistent. Like, he made some unreal throws in that game when I was watching, and then the offense was just kind of like last year's Jacksonville offense a little bit more in the second half. But good game versus Miami, first one of the year. I like to think. I mean, I think the concern with Lawrence, JB, I don't want to sound too rosy and glass half full, because I know he could do that sometimes, but here's a guy that we drafted to be a generational quarterback. He was underwhelming last year. I don't know if it's a Jacksonville maybe offensive problem, or like there should be a little apprehension. Now, it's not a Deshaun Watson, Danny Dimes type panic. I think he's going to be a starting quarterback for a long time because he's gifted. But what are we looking for here as far as production?
Again, it goes back to that baseline, that expectation. If we were hoping that he jumps into top 12 quarterback status from a production standpoint, I think there's going to be a little bit of disappointment. For Dynasty purposes, I'm still on board.
Yeah, like real quick. So in like that kind of 12 for 21, only 1 touchdown, boring game, he was still the 17th quarterback overall out of 32 quarterbacks last week. So
it was just such a gross. It was such a gross week.
It was a gross week, So hey, in the gross week, if he's in the middle of the pack, he's not losing. His job's not in trouble.
And then to go with Lawrence, Christian Kirk, another week 1 dud, but he had the route participation. It was an interesting game because Evan Ingram, from a fantasy standpoint, wasn't there. Christian Kirk wasn't there. Brian Thomas, he found the end zone. Etienne, he was Tank Bigsby. He had some splash plays, but overall, like Christian Kirk, I think he's going to bounce back. The thing that I liked more than last year, yes, he wasn't demanding the targets. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say, ignore that fact, because I brought up with Jaxon Smith-Njigba, but their price was a little bit different coming into the season. But Christian Kirk, I still think, he's also coming back from an offseason injury. He was banged up. So I think we're going to start to see a little bit more there out of Jacksonville.
In some ways, JB, like the NFL is no different than like the 9th graders I taught today. Sometimes when the passing script just doesn't quite go your way in a game, there's some good receivers out there that you just can't get the ball even though you wanted to. They might have dialed it up and then the O-line broke down, or Etienne fumbles, or there was 3 sacks at certain points. Sometimes the game narrative just doesn't work in your favor. So I think as fantasy owners, you just don't want to panic, especially after 1 week.
Now, a few guys that I am looking to buy above market, and let me know your thoughts. So Baker Mayfield, I already talked about him a little bit. He is, I have him right up there with Goff at this point. I don't see a reason not to. There was the concern that because Canales left Tampa Bay, well, maybe this offense is going to take a step back. They look crisp. Baker Mayfield, he did what you want from your higher end quarterback. And I know a lot of people don't see him as higher end, but I'm willing to go out and pay. I mean, Baker Mayfield, you know what's a crazy one that I think people would bat their eyes at? Baker Mayfield for Rashad White. Baker Mayfield for Jonathan Brooks, somebody in that tier of running back. Baker Mayfield for Zay Flowers. I'll trade Zay for Baker. 12-team super flex. Again, I'm the market says I should be able to get a piece added on to Baker Mayfield, but I'm going to show conviction there, and I'm going to go make some offers after this show because I think that value is going to continue to rise.
Zay was a little rich for me because I don't want to give up necessarily an elite player, but
don't throw that. Don't throw the where's my challenge flag? Don't throw the word elite out. Oh, willy-nilly here.
All right, that was a little rosy, but he's clearly their number one receiver in Baltimore, and I'm trying to look at my rankings here for my boy Zay. I mean, he's a top 24 receiver.
Can I move Can I move Lad McConkey?
Yeah, I'd move Lad.
Anywhere.
I'd move Lad right now. You know, like I do think like Baker. I watched a lot of that game. It was one of my sleeper DraftKings lineups. Was the Tampa Bay stack. And so I was watching it closely, and Baker was so poised in that pocket, JB. Like, there were times they put pressure, and he's just so good at getting out of there and so confident and then finding his receivers. And then when he does have time, you got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, which are two stud wide receivers. But yeah, I think for Baker, what I hope is like Jalen McMillan doesn't drop a ball like he did. Like, I hope some other guys step up and take some pressure off of Evans and Godwin.
Yeah, the way the wide receiver core looked, I mean, it forced me to move Kate Otten down a little bit in even in 2 PPR leagues. Looking at Chris Godwin, ran out of the slot 44% of the time last year. What was he at last year?
He didn't play in the slot as much last year. Like, he was outside, remember? I think the addition of McMillan allowed him to go back to the slot, which we love.
It was minimal, and they even talked about that before the addition. Last year was 37%, but I think it may have increased as the season went on. But here's where I want to talk about some usage information that I was digging through. In week 1, here is the list of wide receivers with 80% or better route participation, 10% or better first downs per route run, and then 20% or better targets per route run. Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Devontae Smith, and then Chris Godwin and Jameson Williams. So Chris Godwin and Jameson Williams, 2 guys that I expect. It wasn't a fluke week where, hey, the usage was kind of iffy, but they just had splash plays. I expect that usage to continue as the season moves on. So those are 2 guys that I am okay spending a little bit more than market, and same with Baker Mayfield. And then I know he's hurt, but Jake Ferguson, I'm going to throw some more usage numbers here at you, Dan. In week 1, there were 3 tight ends that had at least 50% route participation, 50 unrealized air yards. So there is something left on the table there for them, right? There's a little bit more to get. And then 25% targets per route run. It was Isaiah Likely, Jake Ferguson, and Trey McBride. If there is going to be any discount in your tight end premium leagues on Trey McBride because he didn't have that huge game in week 1, pounce. I saw a trade go through in the DD Discord earlier today that somebody acquired Trey McBride, and they were opportunistic. They went after it. They were aggressive, and they got McBride at a very fair price. And I think now with the injury, Ferguson is somebody that you can get for even less. And again, I'll keep an eye on how the injury progresses and all the information that comes out. But if he sits for a few weeks, I think it's going to be a prime opportunity to buy even lower than what his price tag was.
I hope so, because I really struggled to get him in the offseason as much as this Cowboys
homer. Do it now.
tried. If injury gives the opportunity, I'm going after him. And I was holding my breath with that injury because he is a big part of the Dallas offense. And we talked about this in a previous episode too, of kind of, thoughts on Ferg compared to past Dallas tight ends. Again, I think he's more than just a product of the system. I think he's going to be there for a long time, as long as they could afford him. I think the injury is going to be a 1 week one. I don't think it's going to be 2, but we'll see. But I would pounce. He was very tough to get before. McBride, I think will still be impossible to get. But hey, if you're going to try now.
A lot of people, Dan, you know this very well. They just look at the box score. They look at the final fantasy points. And you look in PPR, if Trey McBride, your stud tight end, had 8 points, there might be an opportunity. Now, again, is it going to be available in every league? No. But I ask that you try. A couple running back tidbits here. Again, data. Oh my gosh. It gets me going, Dan. But running backs in week 1 with at least a 60% rushing market share, 60% route participation, and 10% target share. Bijan Robinson, Ramondre Stevenson, Isaiah Pacheco, and Jerome Ford. This is the Jerome Ford show. The usage was there. I think people are going to be disappointed, or they think of Cleveland and they think, well, I think he was overshadowed by the Deshaun Watson debacle. But Jerome Ford, that usage, I don't see how it doesn't continue up until Nick Chubb comes back. And who knows when Nick Chubb comes back? And Dan, you're smirking, and I don't know why.
I'm just so hesitant on Jerome Ford. It's so hard to take knowing Nick Chubb is going to come back. And
is he going to be the Nick Chubb we know, though? That's the thing.
I have Nick Chubb and the Derrick Henry, like he's not human class. Like he's an alien. They're just made differently. So I do believe he's going to come back. I think it is encouraging that Ford's the only guy to get the ball. I mean, Pierre Strong got it twice, but like Ford didn't really get any chunk yards till late in the game when it was kind of over. Like they didn't move for a while either. Now again, 2 offensive linemen were out. So I think there's a lot of factors there. I think Ford's a good running back. I guess what's more encouraging is 6 catches for 25 yards out of Ford. Like those 6 receptions are nice. They're dumping down to him a little bit too. It's not just Pierre Strong.
Here's a couple moves I would love to make that have gone through. Jerome Ford for a pair of thirds.
If I'm looking for a running back now to help me, I would move the thirds.
Jerome Ford in a second. So you're getting production now, which very well could go beyond 4 weeks. You're getting some insulation and flexibility and liquidity with that second.
Don't you say it first, JB. Don't you do it. Don't you do it.
Whoa. A first? No. Derrick Henry. And I know you love Derrick Henry. I will go to Baltimore and pack his bags.
Oh man.
I will go to Baltimore. About that. I would do it.
No. If you're a contending team though, and I think if Baltimore's in one of the games like week 1 where they're playing from behind, you're going to have some frustrating Henry weeks. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of those weeks in Baltimore. I think they're going to have those bigger grindy games where he's going to have those big performances. And when you're in the second half of the season and playoffs and Jerome Ford's now splitting with Nick Chubb, you're going to be missing Derrick Henry. So I'd be a little reluctant.
And there's a very good chance by the end of the season, we can't even get a second for Derrick Henry. That is a possibility that I think is being ignored whenever there's some analysis coming from Scranton, PA. All right.
I want to roll that dice, man. I want to roll that dice. Let Henry die on the roster.
Hey, if you're watching this, like the video, drop a comment, especially on this one. I want to know Jerome Ford in a second or Derrick Henry. Am I completely off my rocker? And I'm going to be very upset if I see a lot of comments in support of Dan. I'm just saying. So that
I didn't say if you're off your rocker, I would have thrown the challenge flag. I'm just throwing the penalty flag, maybe. Only 15 yards on you. Not a challenge in the play.
All right. So in addition to those 3, and then you look at over 20% targets per route run, the only 2 running backs were Bijan Robinson and Jerome Ford. All right. What do you think of Austin Ekeler? Because he's not going to get the carries, but it seems like that's kind of the role he wants. He's going to be involved in the passing game, even with Brian Like I love Brian Robinson. I've moved him up I've moved him up enough. He was an off-season buy for me. He was involved in the passing game, but look at the depth of target, the air yards from Jaden Daniels. You look at the little spray chart, everything was like this, Dan. Everything was like this. Just right there. Austin Ekeler, there's going to be favorable game scripts for this passing game. And I don't see how they don't keep it close to the line of scrimmage. So I'm just saying, as an absolute, we're talking about maybe 1/3 as a stopgap running back with some contingent value towards the end of his road. I'm not talking about an expensive price tag. Hell, I got him for Malik Washington, and I got a 4th added on to Austin Ekeler in one league. That's the price we're talking about.
As long as you're at that price point, JP, we don't have to have an intervention tonight, all right? I was a little bit worried because I know you've been pro Ekeler for a couple of years now.
But 44% route participation, 17% target share. I don't see how all of a sudden we start to see an offense that pushes the ball down the field. Maybe over time, but for the immediate future, for a dirt cheap price in deeper leagues, Austin Ekeler is somebody that I was looking at. 7 wide receivers. All right. 7 wide receivers. Dan, I'm moving fast, so you got to keep up, buddy. All right. 7 wide receivers had at least 50% route participation, 80 unrealized air yards. So again, they're not coming to fruition. There is more on the plate there. There's still more meat on the bone for these guys. And 20% targets per route runner better. Here are the names. Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill. Forget about them. Xavier Legette, Adonai Mitchell, Cortland Sutton, Tank Dell, Calvin Ridley. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at those box scores for Calvin Ridley, Tank Dell especially, and I think Xavier Legette, I think there's a case to be made that he's going to take over the number 1 role in that offense sooner rather than later. I know
whatever
a lot
that means.
Well, yes, but I'm also thinking Bryce Young's not going to be there.
That's true. I mean, if they put Andy Dalton in at any point,
I'm getting sick over here talking about Bryce Young. But Andy Dalton might be an upgrade for this offense.
I think Andy Dalton would be an upgrade, just like Joe Flacco was an upgrade in Cleveland last year. There's sometimes you just need, as a coach, the quarterback to get the ball upfield and run the offense. And unfortunately, some of these guys can't do that. But Legette does have talent. AD Mitchell, like, I was a little bummed from fantasy this week.
He had 1.2 points, but the usage was kind of intriguing there.
Yeah, and I think we're a little bit limited by Anthony Richardson, who I think is going to put up fancy points all year long.
And Josh Downs was out too.
Downs was out, and Downs is his kind of guy, so I'd be excited. I'd be really looking for Josh Downs when he comes. I think it's going to be a matter of week to week. We're going to have 3 for 125 Alex Pierce. I guarantee you next week Alex Pierce is going to disappear, and it's going to be somebody else. It's just you're only going to get what was A-Rich's stats? 9 for 19, JB? I mean, we only got 9 completions to he's a home run kind of guy.
That's all we need.
Yeah, so I think he's got to temper expectations with AD Mitchell a little bit and Legette. The other guys you mentioned, Sutton, Dell, and hopefully Ridley. We didn't talk a lot about Will Levis. I was a little concerned about his performance and some of his stupid decisions in that game. But I'm hoping he plays better, and I think there'll be better days from Ridley. Tank Dell is going to explode at some point. He was fine. It just happened to be, Nico's the dude, and Diggs got some more burn and whatnot. And Joe Mixon was a volume stud. Sutton, the Denver one was interesting because even though Bo Nix didn't play, great fantasy wise, he threw the ball 42 times, JB, and he actually completed 26 of them. And I know a lot of it's nickel and dime and stuff like that, but I think I think he's going to be smart enough to watch film, and with Coach Payton is going to get better, because a lot of those throws were like Dak Prescott like throws, JB. They were sometimes a little risque, and they were deflected, and they could have either been a catch or an interception. I think he just needs experience, but man, you ask him to throw 42 times. Sean Payton wasn't too shy there with him.
Well, whenever your rushing attack can't get anything done,
that's another story.
What are you going to do? So I agree with the AD Mitchell, little bit of caution there. Tank Dell, probably not going to be able to find a manager sleeping. He had 8.9 PPR points, but that usage, it's everything we want to see. The way he was utilized. But Calvin Ridley, I can't seem to get enough of Cortland Sutton, no matter who his quarterback is. Cortland Sutton and Xavier Legette, just price check on those guys, especially like with how poorly Will Levis played. I think Calvin Ridley, we might be surprised at some of the prices that he's being moved for.
Hey, get him now before injuries happen. You're going to need bye week players. You're going to need flex plays. You're going to need, they're going to have some good weeks. So if you could buy them low, they're not bad guys to buy.
And then 2 tight ends that I think had some hope. And if you were paying attention in the preseason, you saw this. Cole Kmet, Luke Musgrave, they plummeted down my tiers. And it's not just fantasy. It's not just the production. Tucker Kraft took over that tight end room. Gerald is out snapping, out route running, out producing Cole Kmet. So if I'm looking at those 2 guys and you're thinking, man, maybe these are 2 guys I can buy low on, don't. Just let them go. Just let them go.
No, I would say I wouldn't buy low on them. I don't want them by any means. But if I have them on my roster, JB, I'm not necessarily saying I'm moving them to the free agent wire either. Because
no, don't cut them.
I just want to be careful there. If you're looking at the tight end landscape, I wouldn't just be a free giveaway because there's probably, I would imagine, JB, there's probably 15 other tight ends in the same boat that are starting tight ends in the NFL that underwhelmed this week for sure.
Well, no. I'm not saying underwhelmed. They were surpassed on the depth chart. That is the bigger concern. Elite tight. Not to say Cole Kmet and Luke Musgrave are elite by any means, God no. But elite tight ends, what happened this week?
Yeah. Hey, moving for Kobe Parkinson, man. Kobe flashed last night like I hoped.
And now Puka out. Maybe I know a lot of people, they're talking about Tyler Johnson. They're talking about Demarcus Robinson. Is Whittington getting an opportunity? I think Colby, we could see maybe 6-7 targets. And if you're just in a typical PPR league, no, thank you. But if you're in 2 PPR, if you're in a start 2 tight end league, I think that's an interesting one. I'm going to put you to the test here, Dan, because we're not going to get through all these names apparently. But
rapid fire.
I pulled the top 10 players traded from last week on Dynasty Daddy. Who do you think, how do I want to phrase this? Who do you think really continues to see a high demand throughout leagues? Out of all these players, again, I'm putting you to the test here. Sam Darnold, Zamir White, Terry McLaurin, Jerome Ford, Isaiah Likely, Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift, Deontay Johnson, Jacoby Brissett, Rashee Rice, and Ramondre Stevenson. Who do we see just the market still continues? We have buyers and sellers.
Yeah, I think no matter what, there's going to be buyers for Rashee Rice because he's a stud. I think Isaiah Likely is a stud that's going to continue to get volume. I think Sam Darnold, just in the quarterback market with the Vikings, is going to continue to get volume and be a stud. Then I'll go maybe drop a tier, and I say Terry McLaurin and Ramondre Stevenson, their roles are cemented. New England shocked me this week against the Bengals. That's something I'm still wrapping my mind around. But if New England can continue to be competitive, Ramondre is a good play. McLaurin, I think, will get some more passes and targets. They don't have anyone else other than Luke McCaffrey, who's still developing.
I'm worried about him though.
I know.
I am worried about McLaurin.
Yeah, this was the year we hoped for, where he'd kind of break out, and I just think he will have some good games, but I don't think we're going to get it week in and week out.
Yeah.
And after that, man, it's just going to be hit and miss with the rest of these guys. I don't really want any of them. There's a couple I would take. I don't mind them on my rosters, but I don't really want to give much for them.
A guy that I didn't mention earlier in the show, but DeAndre Swift.
He came on late. It was ugly early.
He was still running routes. He was getting those wind sprints in. He was still participating. He gets that participation medal. That's what we're celebrating here on Dynasty Theory now. Oh, good job. You were out there, buddy. But those are, we're going to dedicate more time to this on a weekly basis, getting our feet wet here with week 1 in the books, but trying to really cement down the format we want to go. Of course, Dan talked way too much tonight. I couldn't shut him up. But it will be interesting to see that list of top 10 players that were traded, how it changes next week. You guarantee a lot of the guys that were injured, like Puka, is going to be on that list. Jordan Love is going to be on the list. It happens every single year. But I look at the clock. We're about an hour in. Dan, final thoughts for our fantastic listeners for the 259th time here on Dynasty Theory after week 1. What do you got?
Man, I think I'm about 20 words under my word count. And for our listeners, like JB, probably he didn't even cover every name he had on his list from studying the spreadsheets this morning. But guys I like just add, or I'm kind of maybe in a little bit of buy mode. Jaden Daniels and Anthony Richardson, I think, are both Lamar 2.0 and 3.0, whichever one you want them to be. They're going to run and get points week in and week out. And when they have those good passing games too, you're going to get some blow up weeks. I think the Green Bay receivers, I think you got to be patient on Jordan Love, but I think I'm in on all of them. I just think they all looked good this week. Jaden Reed is explosive. Watson looks healthy. Dobbs just runs great routes. So I think there's production to be had there. And then the last one was J.K. Dobbins. We talked about him in the past, man. He just has some juice, and I think he's better than Gus Edwards. So I'm in on J.K.
Let me ask, are you moving a 25-second in a 12-team super flex league for J.K. Dobbins?
Only if I need that running back to win.
No, I'm not doing it.
Really need it.
I would rather spend that third on Ekeler than spend that second on Dobbins.
You're not going to get near as much production. They're going to win with J.K. Dobbins. They're running, that Chargers team is built through the run game this year.
We're going to re-explore this in about a month, but another fun episode. We appreciate everybody that tunes in each and every week. Make sure you hit that like button. If you're not already subscribed to the DD Fantasy Football YouTube channel or the podcast feed, hit subscribe, hit like. For Mitch Sorensen, who is at a work conference, how dare he? Dan Lamagna, I'm John Bauer. We'll catch everybody next.